Hi guys, welcome back. We are starting a new unit this week, so hopefully you wrapped up your embedded assessment from last week. This week we're starting our book, The Crucible, so we've got that on our plate and a couple other things. So I've modified the work that you need to do a little bit because you guys are going to be starting to read your book here. So I just want to make sure you guys are able to get all this work done and you feel comfortable with what's on your plate this week. So you've got an embedded assessment in 4 weeks. So I want you to keep this in mind as you're doing all the assignments these next few weeks. You guys are going to have to write your own play, your own script. So The Crucible is a play. Maybe you've seen it before. But we're going to read this play. It's a little bit different than reading a story. So reading a play and writing a script is different than writing an essay or writing a short story or anything like that. So that's going to be your task. So as you read through this, notice what the author does to write this play. Notice what Arthur Miller does when he writes The Crucible, because that's what you're going to be doing, all right? I don't expect you to do it as well as he did. He's like this famous author, but it's good to practice these skills. So for your 2.1 assignment, pull up the 2.1 springboard activity. You also might want to pull up the embedded assessment for Unit 2 and look at it. I just want you guys to look at it so you know what you have to do. It's just writing that script. So just know, keep in mind as you're doing this, that's what you're going to have to do. All right, so your main assignments start in activity 2.2, preparing to read The Crucible. All right, so The Crucible is set a long time ago in the 1600s. That's like when America was first founded. When we first arrived here, Puritans are here. They're very, very religious people. So very religious in terms of like everything in society revolves around God and learning to read the Bible and all that stuff. So I want you to read through these 4 different pieces. The first one is Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. The next one is just the New England Primer, which is just little things that they would give kids to teach them how to read. But notice they're all about the Bible. So when we go to school, we don't learn to read through Bible verses. But they did. The Puritans did, because God was the most important thing in their world. And then the next one is the Trial of Martha Carrier, and then the Lessons of Salem. As you read through those 4 pieces, you need to fill out this graphic organizer that I have for you in the announcements and assignments. So the first column is the author's purpose. Why did the author write this? Why did the author include this? So I did this for you with the New England Primer. The author's purpose of this was to teach kids to learn how to read and teach them about the Bible. And the reason for them to read was so they could read the Bible. It's the only reason you would learn how to read in the Puritan times. All right? The next column of your graphic organizer is you're going to tell me what the Puritan beliefs are, what Puritan beliefs are evident throughout that piece. So what Puritan beliefs can you find when you're reading the Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God? So I did that one for you for that piece. If you read Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, you'll find that God is this angry person with men. He hates their sin. He has no obligation to save them. Eternal damnation is very real. Hell is a very real option for people. Like, you're going to go to hell if you do bad things. It's more of like a fear of God. You get a sense of a fear of God. That's the Puritan beliefs you'll see when you read Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. So I want you to do that for the other pieces. So what are the Puritan beliefs that you see in that New England Primer or in the Trial of Martha Carrier? And then lastly, you're going to make connections with the other stories in the group of 4 pieces that you have here in the assignment. So when I read through them, I did the last one for the Lessons of Salem. So I wrote, this passage shows danger of the beliefs in the other 3 passages, because you'll see that in the Lessons of Salem, that piece kind of shows how all the other pieces, those beliefs that are represented in those other pieces are dangerous. So the lessons we can learn from those beliefs that were evident in the other 3 pieces. So that's how that the Lessons of Salem kind of relates to the other pieces of text in this assignment. Shows how those beliefs are really extreme and dangerous. All right, so fill in that graphic organizer. I did a few for you, so you can get a feel for what I'm asking for, what the assignment's asking for, and you're going to do the rest. All right. Next, in activity 2.3, pull up Springboard activity 2.3 And it's going to introduce us to some characters, all the characters in the story actually, by giving us some of their dialogue. So dialogue is just what they say. And basically when you read a play, when you look at this, you can't see this, but when you look at your book, which you would actually be able to look at, it's all just dialogue. So it'll say Mary Warren, and then what she says, Proctor, what he says. And then in italics, you'll see what their stage directions are and how they were supposed to say that and whatnot. So play is just a bunch of dialogue. So we're going to get some of their dialogue. And what you guys are going to do is pick 5 of those characters. So you will see, if you pull up Springboard Activity 2.3, you'll see dialogue from like 10 characters. I don't know, actually, I didn't count them, but many characters. I just want you to pick 5, okay? So just pick 5. So in the graphic organizer, you have many options. You're only going to fill in 5. I did Reverend Paris for you. And what you're going to do is you're going to read their quotes from Springboard Activity 2.3, and you're going to tell me just some notes on what their dialogue was about. Their motivation. So what is clearly their motivation when they're speaking? What are some inferences you can make about this character? So what can you infer? What can you guess about them based on what they had to say? And then you're going to make some predictions. So let's do this Reverend Paris one. So in your Springboard Activity 2.3, some lines from Reverend Paris. Here's the first one. You will confess yourself, or I will take you out and whip you to death, Tituba. So there's his first line. Doesn't he sound like a nice guy? Oh my gosh. Line 2. How can it be the devil? Why would he choose my house to strike? We have all manner of licentious people in the village. And he's saying that to Hale. And then his third line. Rebecca, go with her. We're lost. She suddenly cannot bear to hear the Lord's... And then it just dies off, but he was probably about to say the Lord's Prayer. So there's Reverend Paris in a few lines. So for my notes on his dialogue, I wrote that he sounds very harsh, especially with what he said to Tituba, who you're going to find out that's his slave, his servant. His speech surrounds religion and God, so you would expect that from a reverend. But for motivations, I put he sounds more like his motivations are God or like a fear of God. I put there. For inferences, I wrote, I can tell he's very harsh, even unreasonably so. I think as a reverend and based on his speech, he holds an important or central place in the story. And we'll find out that he does. He clearly has power. Those were my inferences. And for my predictions, I wrote, I predict he's going to be a character I don't like. He's also very judgmental, blinded by a fear of God and an obsession with religion that hurts other characters. So those were my predictions. You're going to do that for 5 other characters that you choose. So you can read through all those lines and pick which 5 characters you want to analyze in that graphic organizer. All right. Now that you've met some of the characters, you're going to read Act 1 of the play. All right. So this play is divided into 4 acts. Each week we're going to read a different act from the play. One thing I will say, I'm an English teacher and I love reading, of course, but plays were not really meant to be read. They were meant to be watched. So it would be ideal if you could watch the play as well as read it. Or I know you're teenagers and you'd probably just watch it. But anyway, read at least some of the scenes. You can watch this play. It's on Netflix. Netflix has it. You can also YouTube various plays that have been performed and recorded. That would be great because this was a play written on a stage, whereas the Netflix is more of a movie. Just get your parents' permission for whatever you watch if you choose to watch that rather than read it. All right? So read Act 1. It's not very long. Look how tiny this book is. So it's not going to take you that long. But after you read Act 1, it ends with all the girls accusing everybody. I saw her with the devil. I saw her with the devil. I saw her with the devil. That's the end of Act 1. So in the book, that'll be clear. But if you're watching this, it may not be so clear where Act 1 is ending. After you read Act 1, you are going to do a writing prompt. So while you watch this, I want you to pay attention to Proctor. He's one of the characters. And also pay attention to Reverend Hale and Giles Corey. So Proctor is a character in our story, and Reverend Hale and Giles Corey foil him. Now, foil means that they are like opposites. And authors create foils to main characters because it brings out their characteristics. So there's a reason the author is doing that. So these two characters are kind of opposites of Proctor. So be paying attention to that and making note of that, because you're going to have to write a little paragraph for me where you write me like a thesis statement or a topic sentence of how they're different. Use quotes from the story to support how you're saying they're different things, different viewpoints that they have that are evident in their quotes. And then make sure you embed those quotations. So we have a kind of a traditional way of writing paragraphs where we've got that topic sentence, we put text details in there, and then we have commentary sentences where we analyze those text details or those quotes from the story. Then we input another quote, have some commentary where we analyze that quote, and then a conclusion sentence to wrap it all up. So make sure you do that. You can also kind of weave your text detail in with your commentary. There's an example for that in here. Of how to embed a quote, but then also add some commentary with it. So it says, John says, "It be a cold home you keep, Elizabeth." Or when John says, "It be a cold home you keep, Elizabeth," he is revealing his frustration with her inability to go on her off her suspicions. So there's a quote, and in that same sentence, it states he is revealing, or he is expressing, or he is indicating, and then you put in your commentary. So that's just kind of like a side note there, so you guys can learn how to incorporate quotes and commentary in the same sentence. But follow the format there: topic sentence, quote, commentary, another quote, commentary, and a conclusion. All right, so you're analyzing how Giles Corey and Reverend Hale are foils of John Proctor. All right, now Springboard Activity 2.5. You're going to look at a scene. This is an interesting scene because this is a scene where we find out Proctor and Abigail had an affair, all right? Which is a big no-no if you're a Puritan, right? Because they're all like super religious. So you're not supposed to have an affair. But they did. So here's the scene. Proctor gently pressing her from him, so he's gently pressing Abigail from him with great sympathy but firmly. "Child." And then Abigail, with a flash of anger, "How do you call me child?" Proctor: "Abby, I may think of you softly from time to time, but I will cut off my hand before I ever reach for you again. Wipe it out of mind. We never touched, Abby." And then here's Abigail: "Aye, but we did." Proctor: "Aye, but we did not." Abigail, with bitter anger: "Oh, I marvel at how such a strong man may let such a sickly wife be," and then it cuts off. So obviously some conflict there. They had an affair. Proctor wants it forgotten about. Abigail, probably still in love with him, doesn't want it forgotten about, wants to still have this relationship with him. So look at that scene. Now you'll notice, like it'd say Proctor, gently pressing her from him, but with great sympathy. Those are stage directions or notes to the actors on how to perform that line. All right? Those are really key because those shape how you're looking at the scene. Those shape what the audience is going to know about these characters, or how we're going to interpret what's going on. And based on those, we can interpret them in different ways. So your job now, I've got some graphic organizers there. Your job is to kind of rework that scene. What would be the different lines or the different gestures or the different movements, the different facial expressions, and the different vocal delivery, what words might be emphasized or such? How would you change those things if first Proctor was in love with Abigail? How would you change those things? What gestures would he be doing instead of what we just read? Or what movements or what facial expressions would he have? Then you're going to kind of tweak it. If Proctor hated Abigail, what lines would be emphasized? What gestures would he have? What facial expressions would he have? What words would he be emphasizing in his vocal delivery? And then if Proctor is afraid of Abigail, how would that change those things? And then if Proctor is conflicted in his feelings with Abigail, he loves her but he doesn't, he wants to stay with his wife, he's like torn. So you're going to go through each of those graphic organizers and you're going to change the stage directions a little bit. Change those little notes. Does she have that flash of anger anymore? Is she speaking with that bitter anger, or is she speaking in a different tone? Would you add a line? Would you take away a line? So go through those graphic organizers and fill that in based on how it would change, how you're told it would change, whether Proctor hates Abigail, he loves her, he's afraid of her, etc. All right, so fill in those graphic organizers. You're going to have to do that in your embedded assessment. You're going to have to think about how you want this scene to look to the audience. What do you want these actors to portray? And then you're going to write in your own stage directions. Is he going to say this with anger? Is she going to have this look of sadness on her face? You would be writing that in your own play script once you do that for our embedded assessment in a few weeks. All right. Lastly, 2.6. You don't have to do anything, but I want to talk about this for a moment, all right? Because you're going to have all of these in your embedded assessment. So it says elements of a script. These are all things you need to think about when you have a script. And I've got this graphic organizer there. The 4 parts of the thing, the 4 things you need to think about when you're writing your script are the ideas. So how are you going to introduce the setting? In a play, right? Because this is to be performed on stage. So how are you going to emphasize the setting and let your audience know where you're at when you've just got a stage to work with? What's the conflict? How are you going to introduce that conflict? So just like any story, a play needs to have a conflict. How are you going to introduce that? How is the audience going to be able to visualize what's going on? What props are you going to need? And then who speaks the most? Who's going to speak the most in your play? Then for organization, how are you going to break up the scenes? Because in a play like the curtain falls after Act 1, how are you going to break up the scenes? How does the plot increase our knowledge of the characters? So how does the plot teach us about these characters? And then for language, how are your characters going to talk, right? The Puritans have, you'll notice, they have a very interesting way of talking. Like they say Goody instead of Mrs. So like Goody Putnam or whatever instead of Mrs. Putnam. And their speech is a little different than ours. And also, how are you going to, like, what diction, what word choice are they going to have? What tone are they going to have? What kind of sentence structure are they going to use? All that is up to you when you're writing the script. And then lastly, conventions. So conventions are also part of, you'll see this in your, when you're reading this play, there's like Elizabeth and then there's a colon and then it says her line. Or there might be hail and then there's a colon and it might say in italics, he's nodding, and then in regular print it'll say what he says. So the italicized words are often their stage directions, how they're supposed to say it, what they're supposed to do while they're saying it, and that sort of thing. All right, so things to think about because you're going to be writing your own script. So read Act 1, get those things, get your assignments 2.2, is that where we started? To 2.6 done. You don't have to do anything for 2.6. And make sure you read or watch Act 1. All right? I'm here to help, so let me know if you need any help or if you're struggling, and we'll make sure we get you taken care of. All right? Bye-bye.